And here's the thing. Have scientists lost their marbles? If you're watching visually, by the way, you might think, why has he just changed his headphones? That's because I was working with a Fisher-Price pair. God. Has the world of science lost it? It's a serious question here. England's Deputy Chief Medical Officer, as I mentioned there at the beginning, has called for the nation's 10 p.m. pub curfew to be brought forward to 6 p.m. in an effort to reduce increasing rates of transmissions. I'll explain this is no laughing matter, but there are things going on that you think, if I don't laugh, I will just literally start gnawing off my own face here. So he made these comments at a private briefing for Greater Manchester's MPs on Thursday, as ministers tried to persuade the region's leadership to accept Tier 3 restrictions. That debacle is still ongoing, of course. So this is the world of science. Now, I'm absolutely sure that no one goes through all of the academic hurdles and hoops that you have to cross and go through to become a scientist. And then I'm sure there are subsequent courses that you go on in order to improve your scientific knowledge to become one of the most respected. And Mr. Van Tam, the last time I looked, had always been noted as one of the most respected. But I draw your attention back to a court case I went to some years ago after I watched a scientist for the prosecution in a particularly grisly case that I was covering. Scientist for the prosecution listed all the reasons why, this person was clearly guilty of murder and done terrible things. And I thought, well, the defence guy, there's no point in the defence man standing up here. There's literally no point. He might as well go home. Case done. And he gave an amazingly fluent and eloquent monologue, as barristers like to do, explaining why you shouldn't always trust science. And clearly he was representing his client. It's his job to find the holes in the prosecution. I get that. But he came out with a statement, and we mentioned this, I think, about a week ago, that science is a version of offence. It's not always definitive. There is consensus. There's a point when, after a certain amount of checks and balances and experiments have been carried out, you can say, well, now we can say that is definitive beyond all reasonable doubt. But up until that point, you are often talking about just people's opinions. And we know from things like the Barrington Declaration, there's a lot of opinion going on here. Is it peer-reviewed? Some people shouted. I don't think there's anything in this coronavirus that's peer-reviewed, by the way. And that's been evidence, really, by what's been going on with science. I mean, you must remember, the reason we didn't have an early lockdown is because the scientists said, don't have an early lockdown. The scientists, not the politicians. The politicians at that point were carrying out the work based on the science advice. And the science advice at that point was, don't have an early lockdown. So people can get as evangelical about this as they like. But at the time, nobody on Labour, Lib Dems, SNP, nobody was saying, no, close the country, have a lockdown. Because the science said, don't do that. Don't have a lockdown. In fact, they told ministers, scientists told ministers back in March, if you lock down too early, it will cost lives. These are the same scientists that are now saying that we locked down too late and we need another lockdown. These are the people that insisted the government free up hospitals, which led to people being released from hospital into care homes. Remember that? You think ministers did that because they woke up one morning and said, oh, let's release Granny into a care home? No, they were told by the world of science to free up hospitals. Free up hospitals, number one on the list, free up hospitals. So the politicians, okay, well, he's Van Tam, Whitty, Vallance and co. These are about the brightest in the entire arena of science. So, well, what do we do? We got a 92-year-old woman here. What are we going to do? Send her? No, it's send her to a care home. This was scientific advice that gave us this. Let's look at masks. Remember the utter confusion over masks? Deputy Chief Medical Officer Jenny Harris warning that wearing a mask was not a good idea. You can actually trap the virus in the mask and start breathing it in, she said. Her views were echoed by, are you ready? Professor Jonathan Van Tam. Yes, him again. There was no evidence, he said, that general wearing a face mask by the public who are well affects the spread of the disease in our society. Even on this 2-week circuit breaker. Can they just say lockdown, please? With Sakir Hindsight, who's jumped on the back of it. If you look at what the scientists also said, by the way, in that, they said the evidence base into the effectiveness and harms of these interventions is generally weak. They simply made the point that in the absence of any other evidence, this is the option. They're just throwing stuff at the wall here. You do realise that. They are clearly, demonstrably throwing stuff at the wall. Has the world of science lost its marbles on this? 0344 499 1000. And the current emphasis we have on pubs it could not be more overstated. Am I the only one confused by this? Pubs, isn't it? It seems to be this default answer. Pubs. It's like some Pavlovian response. Coronavirus, pubs. Everybody's shouting the same thing. Where do you think the pubs? Before you could even get any kind of counter explanation out, they're shouting pubs. Think about this. On any given day, think about the UK. On any given day, are you more likely to find more members of the public in shops and shopping centres or in a pub? Well, we all know the answer to that. We're not hearing the same hysteria about Bluewater or Lakeside or Meadowhall. None of that kind of stuff. We're just hearing pubs. It's pubs, isn't it? You very rarely hear people talking about shops being the prime area of concern. For some reason, we've left the humble pub, the Rose and Crown. It's now being defined as some kind of Transylvanian temple of doom. It's a pub, and it's not the place most people visit. What about buses, for example? What about down in London, the tubes? Man alive, if nobody ever disputed that if there was a cold going around, the worst place to go is on the tube, because somebody's got a cold, then you're essentially in a massive tin can, crammed in there, and I don't think anybody would really doubt that if somebody's got a bad cold, then there's a chance that some people will catch the cold. But nobody's mentioning that in the same breath. We seem obsessed, I don't know why, with the pubs. And by the way, on the 10 p.m. curfew, bearing in mind you can only go into a pub now with members of your own family or your bubble, surely now is the time to drop the 10 p.m. curfew. It's more nonsensical than it was last week, and last week it was pretty nonsensical. Wales has now gone into a lot. What do they call it, Ricky? What do they call that road? Yeah, it's not. What's the other one? The circuit break. It's not a circuit breaker in Wales. It's a firebreaker. What are they having a competition? Is there some kind of national COVID synonym contest going on? We're going for circuit break, Carol. Oh, we've only got 5 at this, and we've got fire break. Fire break wins it this week for Wales. Well done. Yeah, you can sort of see the scratching around. We've got to have a different thing. Now we've got this. I'm looking at the numbers as well. You've got, what was it? There was crazy numbers in Norfolk. You could understand why people are saying don't have a national lockdown when we've got no cases of coronavirus. Over the weekend, the entire county of Essex, there were 45 COVID patients in hospital across the entire county and only 1 in ICU. And yet Essex Council was saying, yeah, we need a 2-week lockdown. What is going on out there? And this is mostly advice. I mean, Keir Starmer is, of course you listen to the advice of scientists. Only a fool would say you don't. But do you throw the whole thing at it from a scientific perspective? And actually, I've sort of discovered a newfound sympathy stroke understanding for the government on this. So I think have been mostly awful. And Matt Hancock, the Undertaker, walking around the place, still can't quite believe he's got the big gig. And they've lost the room, haven't they, over the last weeks? But now I'm looking at this thinking, well, do you know what? I can understand the kind of Venn diagram they've got one foot in the world of science, but they've got another one in the world of everything else. It would be preposterous to suggest a 2-week national lockdown everywhere in places where there is no coronavirus. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? It's completely barking mad. 0344 499 1000. Has the world of science lost the plot? 0344 499 1000. And I'm just drawn to those comments on everything from lockdown itself to face masks to pubs, disproportionality and pubs. And if you look at the confusing picture, if you look at the multifarious ways, the very same scientists have described these very same scenarios in different ways over the month. No to an early lockdown. Now we should have had an early lockdown. No to face masks. Now you should be fined out of your own pants if you're caught wearing a face mask. No to pubs closed. No, pubs are fine. No, pubs aren't fine. Oh, in fact, they're even worse than fine. They're at 10 p.m. curfew we should have. Is that good? Oh, I don't know. 6 p.m. What about 6 p.m.? What about even earlier? Man alive, where are we going on this? Has the world of science lost the plot here?